Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. So let's get started, and of course at the end of the video we do talk about the viewer's pick of the week, so in the comments below let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured. This week I had a pretty average size haul, and there were some bigger books, and most of those big books were actually indie titles, which was kind of cool to see. So let's jump in. Number 11 for me is Marvel Voices Pride, issue 1. I am shocked to see this so low because I really like DC Pride. That was actually my pick of the week from that week, and having this one be my least favorite of the week is a little weird. I honestly, if I had to answer what franchise I like more, I would honestly say I'm more of a Marvel fan overall. I do love DC and Marvel, I would say almost equally, but if I had to lean more towards one way, it would be Marvel. That's what I grew up with. So to see that the Pride book just didn't excite me as much as DC does surprise me. And I think mostly it's because DC felt a little bit more jointed. It felt like they were talking about characters that would appear in future stories somewhere else or was connected to previous volumes of their Pride. And this just felt very disconnected. There was a lot of Elseworld characters that they were focusing on, and just not a lot of the main cult favorite characters like Carolina and Nico or North Star. We didn't really get to see those characters as much. The only ones we really got to see was Black Cat and Wiccan and Hulking. And honestly, there was no story that really stood out to me. I thought the Black Cat one would, but I honestly didn't love the vibe of that. It was mostly her possibly cheating on Spider-Man for some reason. I didn't quite love that much. I don't think that was really a great view of the character. And yeah, there wasn't anything that really stood out for me. Even the Gwenpool stuff, I've been reading some of the online Gwenpool stories, and I feel like, why didn't they just pull some of those stories into this, and that would make it feel like it mattered past just a short story. So overall, giving that 2 stars, and that is number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is Bettie Page, issue 1, a book I was really looking forward to. I like the creative team, I really like the art, but this was very different from previous volumes of Bettie, where it was more of an espionage book, where we got to really see a spunk from Bettie, but this definitely plays a little bit more into the acting, modeling side of her, which I always found as an interesting front for this character, but the espionage is really what makes Bettie interesting. But if I had to say a devil's advocate answer, what also makes Bettie interesting is that every volume really focuses on a different facet of her, and I guess this facet really just wanted to focus a bit more on the Hollywood aspect of her character, but that just didn't interest me as much as the dual identity of what we've seen with Bettie. Even though I thought the artwork was cartoony and fun, it just didn't really hit the marks I was expecting. So overall, I gave that 2 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is Spider-Man India, issue 1. This, I feel like, was recently announced, and now it's already coming out because of the Across the Spider-Verse film. And I wanted to pick it up because I enjoyed the character from Across the Spider-Verse. There was this very unique look to his world. He didn't really have trauma to deal with, which I thought was very interesting. So I was like, oh, let's see how they bleed that into this book. And I feel like they didn't really lean into the Indian heritage as much as I thought they would. There's some food comments here, and that was fun. But I thought they could lean into the world a little bit more. And then honestly, everything else was kind of a beat to beat of what we've seen with Spider-Man before. We've seen the Lizard before. We've seen a version of Peter Parker being a scientist, and I just don't feel like, besides obviously the background of the character, delivered anything new story-wise. I kind of wish there was more of the background of the character to get into that heritage and that culture. So overall, giving that 2.5 stars, even though artwork was just okay, it was just overall a forgettable issue. Moving on to number 8, and that is Captain America Cold War, a book I've been sticking around with because I like the beginning of it, but I feel like kind of has lost its way as we get towards the end of this book. And I think it's definitely more for fans that have been Captain America fans forever. There's a lot of name drops that happen here that I'm like, I think I know who that is, but I'm not really sure. So I don't want to say that this issue didn't move. There's definitely some interesting components, but as someone who's just been reading this volume, it didn't really do much for me. I thought the artwork was a bit too dark. I thought, honestly, there were some stiff moments here. So as someone who's not a hardcore Captain America fan, I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars. But if you really like Captain America, I do think there are some name drops in this one that you might like. But I think I am dropping Captain America for the time being. Now, moving on to number 7, a book that I was not getting until I went to the comic book store and found out everyone was talking about it, and I was like, I guess I'll get this issue, and that is Void Rivals, issue 1, also the title of this episode. So is it worth the hype? And I would say if you know what happened in the story before you read the story, I don't think it's worth the hype, because I think the big moment is, spoiler alert, when we get to see the Transformer come out and be like, oh wow, okay, this book is not just a Robert Kirkman book, it's actually this birth of this new universe for, we find out in this issue, Transformers, but at the end of the book you find out it's also for G.I. Joe and the new work for hire stuff they're doing and licensing stories they're doing, but now connecting it to a bigger world, which on a big landscape, that's interesting. I think if you're a fan of Transformers, you're a fan of G.I. Joe, that's so different. You know, seeing an indie comic or indie series be able to kind of expand and into these old nostalgic properties. And we've been seeing a little bit of that, or at least expanding universes of indie books in something like Radiant Black. So we're kind of used to it. But to see, like, again, these two television properties bleed into a Robert Kirkman book who, you know, started out in comics and then went to television. It's just this interesting marriage. I am very interested to see the creators that are jumping onto these books too. They're big names like Darren Warren Johnson, and then also Joshua Williamson, two of my favorite creators. So I'm like, oh man, I don't even like G.I. Joe or Transformers, but I might try out these first issues. But that's going into the actual issue. That's kind of my issue with this book, is that if you love Transformers and you weren't spoiled, you're going to be like, whoa, what just happened? But if you like kind of take out all of that, I don't know much about these characters. They kind of just jump you into this story where I'm like, okay, so why should I care about this universe? Why should I care about these indie independent characters? And that I didn't quite get. I thought the art was good. I'm also not a sci-fi fan, so there's just a lot working against me on this one. I don't know if I'll continue Void Rivals, but I think I'll at least see where Transformers and G.I. Joe goes and try out the first issue. So really, it's so dependent on the circumstances if it's worth the hype or not, and if you weren't spoiled. But I'm guessing if you're watching this, you kind of already know what happened with this book. So overall, gonna give that, I think I gave it 2.5 stars, and that is number 7. All right, moving on to number 6, which is Ghostlore issue 2, a book that issue 1 I was a little on the fence for, but it gave me enough to want to try issue 2. And issue 2 is so different than the first issue, and I don't know if I like that or not. I think I liked it as a story, but I don't know if I enjoyed how just jarring it was from if you enjoyed that first issue. But it is about this dad and daughter who have lost everything, and now they could kind of talk to ghosts, and there's some like demons involved. You learn a little bit about these ghosts, and it's kind of all over the place, I would say, but there's still something that's interesting about it. There's still this mystery of like, where is the, you know, these pair of leads gonna go? Will this be more character driven? Are we gonna see more of the ghosts? There's still something there that wants me to pick up more. I also really like the art. It's the same artist that did Red Mother, same artist that did the Regression, and the other artist is who did the first issue of Ghostlore. And I thought that was a very interesting juxtaposition of the artwork. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 27. Another book I'm kind of torn on. This has been an interesting week, but Spider-Man, it's so interesting. I went to the comic book store, and it's cool to see more people were talking about Void Rivals than they were talking about Spider-Man. You know, Spider-Man was the big talk of the town a few weeks ago with Ms. Marvel, and now they're like, oh, I didn't really like that issue, so do I care about the next one? I find that very fascinating. And I think with this issue, it kind of bites off too much that it could chew. There's definitely some interesting tidbits, which is why it's higher. Like, I really like the Gold Goblin conflict of him killing someone, and that also dealing with, for some reason, I care about Ms. Marvel's death, but also he didn't really know Ms. Marvel, but he kind of knows Ms. Marvel, so he kind of cares about it. So we get to see that interesting tidbit. We get some Dr. Octopus stuff that's related to J. Jonah Jameson. So I'm like, all right, that's kind of interesting thread. And then obviously you have the Ms. Marvel death, which I don't think they've handled correctly at all, and I don't really understand why we're getting the emotional feelings of Norman Osborn before we get it with Mary Jane, who kind of dealt with it more. So I still feel like this is a very convoluted book, right? There's like little nuggets of gold that could possibly go somewhere, but they're not actually going anywhere. But I like the artwork. I thought the artwork was much stronger for this issue. Again, just a little conflicted with this issue. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, another Spider-related book, and that is Spider-Gwen, The Shadow Clones. And honestly, this is fun. It doesn't reinvent the wheel by any means. I think the artwork is okay, but I like this idea of this mustache-twirling villain who wants to destroy all the Gwens in the universe, and it's just kind of fun to read, and I think the villain is developed enough to be interesting. I like these other Gwens. Obviously, I like Gwen as a character. So, is it the most memorable Spider-Gwen story? No, but is it one of the more recent, better Spider-Gwen stories? Yeah, it's nice that we're getting some Spider-Gwen. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. I believe I gave that 3.5. No, I actually gave that 3. So we're moving on to number 3. And as Green Lantern issue 2, another book I am conflicted with. That is the theme of this episode. Green Lantern. So many great stuff in this. I love the groundedness of Hal. I really like his character. I like that we're going back to basics with him. This is always what I liked more about the Green Lantern franchise. More than when they go to, weirdly enough, more than when they go to space and are being, space cops. I like this stuff where you're still Green Lantern, you're still on Earth, and you're dealing with your sector. But I'm still so torn on Carol. I love Carol. I like Carol more than Hal. I know. I'm sorry. I do love Hal, but I've always had a soft spot for Carol, and I just feel like she is just the girl, the girl who was in love with Hal, and she's just so much more than that. And, maybe there's an opportunity to see some more of her hero stuff, but I just feel like they've kind of taken away her voice in this issue, or the series thus far, and I don't know how to feel about this love triangle thing. It's not really that fun to read, so we'll see where it goes. There's definitely a lot of goodness in here, but when it comes to Carol, that's where I'm a little bit more wary about. But I like the cliffhanger. Don't know if I like that it has to tie into an event already with issue 3, but it does look like a cool cliffhanger. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 3. Number 2 is a book I actually picked up on whim, and that is Klik, Klik, Boom, issue 1. This is the creator of Plastic and Plush, so usually got some weird concepts with some fun horror. I think this is such a fun concept, right? I don't know if I felt like, oh man, issue 2, can't wait for that. But I love the visuals of this book, where we get to see this girl who can't speak, so she speaks through photographs. There's stuff that definitely is rushed in this issue, where we get to meet the other character who's this kind of detective journalist who runs into our antagonist / protagonist, and they somewhat have to team up, and that kind of gets convoluted within it, but I think the visuals are so interesting. She's a very unique character. There's a potentially interesting dynamic that's introduced here that definitely makes me think this was a good first issue, wants me to read issue 2. Maybe not like, oh my god, need to read issue 2, but I'm like, yeah, I'll give issue 2 a shot. And the artwork's really good and unique for this one as well. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, the book the obvious choice for me, and that's Second Coming, Trinity, issue 3. I love this book. I love the messages that it has to say, and this one we get to see Jesus in his childhood and comparing it to the superhero's childhood, or the potential of what people could see this child to be. And Jesus, we get to see a story of him kind of taking advantage of his abilities and people being scared of that. And Mary's like, hey, you have a decision to make here. Do you want to be scared? Do you want people to fear you, or do you want to help people who actually need it? And that's why we get into the present and how it connects, where we get to see Jesus helping people that are not rich, or not all so powerful, and just need his help and need his forgiveness. And I found that to be very fascinating. And I just love the little intricacies. I love the themes in this book, and every issue has something really poignant to say about life, about religion, about superheroes. It's just in a really interesting package. And of course, the artwork is always great. I love to see the past Jesus combined with the present, more bright superhero storytelling here. And it's just always a fun book. So overall, giving that 4 stars, that is my pick of the week. Let me know in the comments below what your pick of the week was. And the viewer's pick of the week from last week was Spider-Man. And here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.